everyone. Today I am doing a screen recording of my Photoshop files to show you all how to edit your images that you will be documenting of your work. And this can be used in your portfolio for just documenting your stuff, and then just it's really good skills to know just how to use Photoshop. So I hope everybody's doing well in these crazy times. I know it's kind of a lot to do on your own, so hopefully this video is helpful, and if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me afterwards, and I will definitely respond. So yes, let's get started. So I have my Photoshop file, my Photoshop pulled up here. You can tell I have several files opened because it's all on this top bar. I'm using the Mac version of Photoshop, so if you are on Windows, the controls and the interface might look a little different, but it's the same idea. So I have three different images, or three different like documentation stations that I created throughout my house to kind of show you guys three different photographs you can get and what the images come out of that and how to set it up. So this first one, I just opened up my sliding screen door that's in my house, and that opened up a lot of natural light. So I just set down a piece of Strathmore right here and then set my plant on top. So for this demonstration, my plant is kind of like a sculpture or something, a piece of work that you all would be using. I didn't have any of my previous work with me here at home, so I'm just using a plant. But this setup here is really nice because all you have to do is find a window or some sort of place where the floor gets a lot of natural lighting, and then just set a piece of paper on it and plop your sculpture down. So all of this image here will also get uploaded, so you guys can refer to this later. Then the second setup, oh, I realized I spelled image wrong. That's funny. Okay. The second setup is just using a blank wall and a table or desk up against the wall. And then here I taped two pieces of Strathmore and then taped it up against the wall and then placed the plant right here. Then this third image is just using some sort of desk lamp when it gets dark. Right here I took the images while it was still light out, but it's kind of gloomy today, so that's why I added the light. This would probably be optimal though if it was nighttime, because you'd get a lot more contrast. So that is another option. Here I have this really handy dandy desk lamp, but you can use any sort of bulbs or whatever you want and kind of position it around your piece. So if you don't have pieces of Strathmore, you can also just tape up pieces of like 8.5 by 11 white sheets. You can, if you have a piece of fabric that is pretty large, preferably white. White helps reflect the light, and so you'll get better quality from light backgrounds. But you could also use black as well. It's kind of up to you, and it's kind of what you have at home or wherever you're working. Okay, so first step when you are working in Photoshop is just kind of getting to know how things are arranged and how it's set up. So the first thing so I'll just start with an image here. So we're going to be editing this image that I took from this setup here. I kind of just did a top-down view of the plant with that white piece underneath. So in order to get this image here, all these shots were taken from my iPhone, by the way. So I airdropped the photos to my laptop, and then I go to Photoshop, I open up Photoshop, I click on File, and then Open. So then I can find all of my downloads and then open whatever image I want to open. So that is the first step, is opening up your image. I'm going to click cancel because I already opened this image. But once you have your shot opened up in Photoshop, you're going to go back to File and click Save As. This is the first thing that you want to do because you want to make sure that it's labeled correctly and saved as the right file and in the right location. So I just kind of came up with this kind of system for labeling things. I wanted to save it onto my desktop. Sometimes the default will be downloads if you get the image from your downloads, and then it becomes really hard to find it. So I would just put it on your desktop, and then if you have a folder for these images, that's even better. And then it's also going to probably open as a JPG file, but then you want to save it as a Photoshop file, and then click save. And it says, do you want, because I'm resaving this, so I'm going to click cancel. So right when this image opens up, you are just going to see it on the page. Then you want to, so once it's saved as a new file, you want to go to image size. Now, typically, this is what my iPhone will send me. So this image size is going to help you when you are printing and when you are editing and uploading things digitally. So you want to make sure, right now this is 42 by 56, which is like really huge. So think about the maximum size that you want your photos to be. For me, I would say the max width on this would maybe be, I don't know, the max height might be like 10 inches if I'm doing like a full 8.5 by 11 or something. And then I would change the resolution to 300 pixels per inch. Now this is really helping because Photoshop uses pixels, and so the more pixels and the more resolution you have, the better quality edits you're going to get. Now, the only thing with this is that it makes your files like ginormous. And so if it starts to become too large for your laptop or for whatever you're doing, you can change the resolution. 300 is the max though. I wouldn't go any higher than 300 because then you start to get into like craziness. 300 might actually be a little too high. I would say be between, you know, like 150 to 300. Yeah, because see how big this file is already. Yeah, you could also play around with the size of your image too, and that can help kind of bring down the size. So now that I have changed that, I want to click on this layer here. So Photoshop uses layers to kind of arrange everything. So right now all we have is background, and it has this little lock symbol here. So first you want to do is unlock this. That kind of opens it up and allows you to edit it. The next thing that I like to do is to double click where it says background and rename the layer so you start to understand, and then you can kind of see like what layer you're on. So you can play around with this. If you click the eye here, you hide that layer and you just see your pixel background, and then you can show it again. All right, so eventually we are going to get to this image here. Now, since I took this top down, I really just wanted to focus on the plant itself and kind of hide this floor and even hide the fact that it's sitting on a piece of Strathmore. So by that way, I decided to just delete the background of the image and just replace it with a white rectangle. So I can show you here. I just have a rectangle. This is my plant layer, and then this is my brightness and contrast. So there are a couple of things that we are going to do. You also have to keep in mind when you're taking the photo, you kind of already want to be thinking about what you want to edit with it. So then you know what to include in your photograph. And so here I knew that I wanted to delete the background. So I made sure that most of the plant was on this white piece because it becomes a little bit trickier when you have this other background below it. But you're going to start by selecting your layer here, and you want to start to delete these outside pieces. And so the fastest way to do that is to use this little tool here. It's called the rectangular marquee tool. Click on that and start to drag the rectangle across these pieces that you don't really want. So I'm going to pull it all the way down to like the tip of the plant. Make sure you select it on your plant layer. They're on your sculpture layer, and click delete. Then if you notice, there's still this kind of like dotted line around it. And you can keep dragging and then your dotted line is going to disappear. There. Now, if you want the dotted line to completely go away, you can go back up and click this tool and then do Command D, and that will deselect. In Photoshop, there are some simple commands that is really good to get to know. Command D is one of those that is really useful. So notice how I'm doing this, but I'm clicking delete and nothing's deleting. That's because I'm not selecting this layer here. So you want to make sure you do that. Command D. Then I'm just going through and kind of like really boxing out, Command D, all of these spaces to make it easier to go back later and just delete the other pieces. So I'm just doing this kind of quickly. Delete. Okay, so this is looking kind of silly right now, but I would go back to this tool up here. Oh, also something, a really good tip is that you'll notice in Photoshop, if you try to undo what you're doing, like I'm going to click Command Z right now, you can only undo the last thing that you did. So if I click Command Z again, it just takes me back to where I was. So this can be really difficult if I want to go all the way back to when I had this entire image. So that's when it's really useful to go up to Window, click Window, and you want to click on the History tool here. So click History, and that's when you're going to start to see this kind of pull down menu, and it shows you all of the history. So this is something that I didn't learn until like I don't know. I should have learned it earlier on because it can be really difficult when you can't go back and redo stuff. But this tool is really nice because you can click on these different things and it'll show you what you've done. So you can go back to open, or you can go back to all these things and it kind of shows it. So I'm just going back to where we were. But this is a really nice tool to know how to do. And if you're looking for it, just go up to Window and click History. Also, if you don't see your layers or anything, this is also where you can make sure that your layers are checked and anything else that you want is also checked. I wouldn't do everything because that can get kind of overwhelming. Okay, so now I'm selected on my plant layer and I still want to get rid of the backgrounds here. And so I'm going to zoom in. Oh, another useful tool is to click Option, so the Option key, and then scroll your mouse, and that's how you can zoom in. You can also, if you have a mouse pad, kind of zoom in with your fingers too. So I'm using this tool here. It's called the Magic Wand, and this is basically going to select all the pixels kind of similar to each other in the area, and this tool is amazing. So the reason why we have like the white background is so we can easily select all of this white and then just delete it. And we can delete that there and delete that, delete, and keep going. Now wait, notice though, I'm going to zoom in again with the Option and scroll, that it accidentally selected some of my leaves. So that's when I want to go back, click deselect this piece because I don't want to delete these pieces here. Do Command D and then kind of play around with what I can select so I don't get that piece. So, oops, well, it's okay. Then, oops, you see how all of that's selected because there's not enough contrast here. So Command D, we'll go back to those later. So I'm gonna go through and kind of get all the easy ones first. This may take a while to kind of get the hang of. But it really helps with like this white background, so you can select it all at once. So I'm just kind of going through, doing this, okay, doing that. Also keep in mind, if you like the image that you had before, let's say this one here, or oops, see now I can't go all the way up, but this one here, you could also just crop this here and then just call it good. You don't have to go through and delete the whole background. This is just something that I'm showing you all how to do because eventually you'll have to know how to do it. Wait, where was I? Oh yeah, no, I was here. Then go down. Okay, so this is looking better. All right, and I'm gonna keep selecting things and deleting them. And then you see how there's like these kind of like little pieces here. We'll fix those. Okay. So now this is when we start to want to put in our new background. So I think in this one I just had a white background. So you just use the rectangle tool over here, start at one corner and drag your way across. Now, the way that Photoshop is set up is that if you look at your layers on the right side over here, you're going to see that the rectangle layer is on top of the plant layer. And so you're probably wondering like, oh, why can't I see the plant? Well, that's because the rectangle is on top of plant. But then if I drag it and pull it underneath, now it's under like this. So that is a good thing to remember. Then I'm going to go through and change my rectangle to white. And this is nice because then you can start to see where all these little pieces need to be deleted. Oh, see, I'm on the wrong layer now, so I need to go back to plant and then delete. Delete, delete, delete. Okay, now I'm going to deselect and go back. So if we see some of these pieces here, this is when we want to start to use the selection tool. So you want to use the polygonal lasso tool. And that is where you can basically click around and then back to where you started and then delete whatever is in that space. So that becomes really useful over here when I don't want to select the plant, but I do want to select all these like weird pieces. Then over here, this is where we really want to use this. So you're going to zoom in and start to outline this plant and do the best that you can. This is what takes a lot of time, honestly. But you don't have to go through and select the entire plant because that magic selection tool already does most of the work for you. So I'm just kind of clicking around and then going back to where I started. And then when you see that little circle next to the cursor, that means you can select it and then make sure you're on the plant layer and then delete. And then Command D will help you get out of that. Okay, so now we are at about where we started over here, or about where I started to edit this. And the next step here is once you have that background and you have your plant kind of figured out, you can select this and start to move it around and see where you want to put it. A helpful tool also is to lock this rectangle underneath because sometimes you'll accidentally drag the rectangle instead of this layer on top. So I say I kind of want it just right here. And now I'm going to go up to my adjustments tab up here. You can also go window, make sure your adjustments are up. So adjustments, and I'm first going to look at the brightness and contrast. Notice how that layer shows up too. Then a properties tab is going to pull up. So make sure you're on this layer. So if you're on the plant layer, properties just has this. Then click back here. You can edit your brightness and contrast. So I'm going to kind of play around with this and see what kind of contrast I want. Maybe like that. That's looking nice. Then I'm going to go back to adjustments. So brightness and contrast is a really great one. Adjustments is really the main tool that you're going to want to use when you're editing your images. So if you kind of scroll around, you'll see brightness, contrast, levels, curves, exposure, vibrance, channel mixer, color bands, hue and saturation. All of these things you can kind of play around with and just see like, oh wow, this inverted thing. If you don't like it, you can go through and click the little trash over here and delete that. Oh yeah, gotta delete both. Okay, but the next tool that I really like in adjustments is levels. So you can start to play with the amount of darkness that's in your image and the amount of whites, and then your grayscale. So you can tell there's like a big difference here. So this kind of plays with contrast a bit, but you can start to move these around and see what you like. So once you have finished editing your image and you are satisfied, this can take a while sometimes. When you start to get nitpicky with this, it can take a while like I do. But once you're done, you want to make sure you do File, then Save, just so everything is saving as a PSD file. Then when you want to export it, you do Export As and JPG. You can also do a PNG as well. JPEGs are nice. PNGs are actually nice if you have a white background because it'll be transparent. But I would do JPEG, click Export All, and then you can just put it on your desktop and click Export. And there you go. Alright, so now we are going to jump over to the next photograph that I took. And this was using the setup that was here with the light kind of pointed right at the plant and then the pieces of paper underneath. And now looking at this Strathmore, I kind of wish that I had pulled it down farther and had this kind of line here disappear, because as you look at my image, you start to see this line here, which is totally okay. But for me, I don't know, it kind of bothers me and it's a little hard to get rid of, so I would recommend pulling it down if you can. But basically, I'm just going to show you how to edit this image looking at it from kind of just the profile, since I showed you the top-down one as well. And you can start to see there are some nice shadows, so this could be a good place to start to understand shadows. I know a lot of your sculptures have really beautiful shadows, so that could be really helpful. So this is what the final image is gonna end up looking like. So I can kind of show you here where at this point I actually didn't delete the background. I just started to add different layers over here and kind of play with that. So again, I opened it. I opened that file that I had, use my desktop, I'm gonna click cancel, but that's how it worked. Then I'm gonna check my image size again, because that's also important. Oh, look, this is straight from my iPhone. So I'm gonna say the max width is maybe 8 inches by 6, and then I'll change it to 300 pixels, and then click OK. Perfect, there we go. Then I'm gonna zoom in, and we are gonna start editing this plant here. So I'm going to unlock the layer here. That's kind of the first step that you want to do. I know I mentioned that before, but it's kind of hard to do that if your layer is locked, because you really can't do anything with it unless you unlock it. So I'm first going to go through and select this layer here, and I'm actually just going to move it a little bit and start to play around with where I want this image, because I noticed that there is this like line up here, and I'm just going to stretch it by hitting shift and then this button here, and then I'm going to shift it again. Now, see, notice how I'm just completely hiding this like top Strathmore part, and I still want the top of the plant, but then also, let's say I don't want this line here, I can actually just keep hitting shift and then just delete it right out of here. So for this demonstration, I'm going to show you all how to get rid of this line, but in the future, be smart about what you're doing, save your time, and just eliminate it if you can. Now, also, just a reminder, like, these lines are not a big deal. I think in the end, it's really not noticeable. You're gonna focus on your form anyways. So yeah, but I'm just showing you how to do this just in the future. So I'm gonna click this check mark up here, and there we go. So what I'm going to start to do is first play with my adjustments, because at this point I'm not deleting the entire background like what I did for this one. I actually want to keep the background because the shadows here are really important to me. So instead, I'm just going to start by editing the brightness and contrast and just kind of seeing, like, even notice how this line up here actually disappears when I up the brightness. And that's really nice because then I don't have to do anything and it's just disappears. So I think in this case, since I have that light shining on it, it looks a little bit better with a bit more brightness and then even more contrast. So that is a tool. You can also change the exposure, which, where is that one? This one here. And that's another way to kind of change the brightness and contrast. And then I'm also going to go with levels, which is one of my favorite adjustments. And I want to be a little bit darker, but then let's bring those grays back. There we go, that's nice. Okay, and let's say just for fun that I want this to be black and white. So then you can actually just instantly make it black and white. I'm going to go back and change these levels even more to get it to where I want it to be. Oh, see, I'm kind of liking this now. Okay. So if you want it to be black and white, if not, you might want to change your levels though. But in this case, I'm just going to keep, well, actually I'll delete the black and white because that can be confusing. Then I'll change my levels again. Yeah, that's kind of nice. Now you can play around with this for a long time. The adjustments is just a really good way to get to know Photoshop, and so this could take as much time as you want. For this demonstration, I'm going to keep it kind of fast. As you can tell here, the levels isn't, you know, too big of a difference, and as I'm doing it the second time, it does help though. I think especially the brightness and contrast, it does help. So the next thing that I want to do is delete this line under here, and it can be a bit tricky, but I'm going to do Option and Scroll to get to see this line. Then I'm going to click Command Scroll, and that's how you can scroll back and forth. So that's a really nice, another like kind of shortcut. I'm going to zoom out a little bit more, and there we go. Alright, so in order to get rid of this line, I can't just select it like what we did with that plant tool, because if I do select it and just click delete, now we got weird pixels here because I'm deleting from the entire image. So let me go back, Command deselect, and we're going to use something called the clone stamp tool. So it looks like this, so click on that. And you're going to notice that there's some sort of kind of circular thing going on. I'm going to zoom in again by clicking Option Scroll. And then I'm going to hold down on the Option key until this little like kind of target looking thing appears. Then I'm going to click where I want that to go. So I'll click, let go of the Option command, and then I'm going to drag this across. Now if you notice, you see this kind of plus sign above the circle. That's because whatever I point at, let's say I do this, okay, this is a demonstration, but Option, click, then I'm going to paint over here. Now notice how I have the plus sign on this side, but I'm drawing over here. So whatever this plus sign is picking up on, it's drawing on the left side of the page. So now I lift it up, and I want to delete this, so Command Z. Basically though, I'm picking up on this white pixels here, and I want to place them on top of this line. And that's how I'm going to get rid of the line. It's just basically take what I already have and just paint it on top. Another useful thing is if you're on your keyboard and you see these like kind of brackets, kind of by like the P key, if that makes sense, you can change the size of this really easily. So you can play around with that too. You can also change the size up here and do size, but it's a lot easier to use the brackets. So I'm gonna zoom in again. I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger. Option key. Now I'm placing it really close to the line because I want to pick up on kind of the same shades, and I don't want it to be super obvious that I'm doing this. Now I'm doing command scroll to scroll to the right. I'm going to do option again, click this, and then just keep going, and there we go. Then I'm going to go to the other side and do the same thing. So now sometimes this tool is really helpful, like right here when it's just white. You don't really see this boundary here, but it can be a lot trickier. Oops, option in there. A lot trickier once we're getting into this shadow area. So I'm not going to spend all day editing this because I could, but I'll just show you how this can get a bit trickier. So let's say I still want to select this. See how it's picking up on the bottom piece, but now I have this weird strip underneath. So then you want to start playing around and start, no, we don't want that. But you got to start selecting and playing around with how you can fill that in. So that can take a while. Also another trick that you could do, like I was saying before, is just eliminate that at all and just boop, do that. Because I would say this line here is really not noticeable. But I would just say keep playing around with that clone stamp tool and then you're good. So I'm going to cancel that transform. And this is the final one that I spent a bit more time on. You can tell here I did eliminate that line. Now if you look really closely, you're going to start to notice it looks a little funky. But because this is a shadow and no one's really going to look close at the shadow, it's okay. And if you didn't know that I did that, I'm not sure it would be as noticeable. It's just kind of up to you and what you want to do. So this is just another setup. I would again play with the adjustments. And there you go. Then I'm going to file, export as a JPEG. And export all, and there we go. So that is the end of the short little Photoshop tutorial that I'm showing you guys. Please email me with questions and I should get back to you soon. I will upload these images, especially showing the documentation stations and stuff. And if you have other questions about other tools, feel free to ask me. Also, a really good resource is just Google. So if you're stuck, just kind of type in exactly what you want, and chances are you can kind of find a video that also shows how to do it. That's how I learned a lot of Photoshop. So, and it's also really simple because you can do these small changes, and it makes a big difference to kind of a normal image like this to just really doing the brightness and contrast and the levels and seeing how different this makes. And so I think it's these little things like this that are going to make your portfolio and make your documentation stand out and just seem a lot more professional. And so these are skills that you'll have to know in any major, any design major. And so it's super important to start practicing now. All right, I'm going to stop talking because I love Photoshop and I could do this forever, but I'm going to end it now. Please let me know if you have questions, and thanks for listening.